Welcome to this, our latest Astley Media Project Positivity webcast. Today, I'm in conversation with Emily Esfahani Smith, whose book, The Power of Meaning, explores the 4 pillars we need to have in place to achieve deep and significant lives. We spoke about that, yoga, her favourite piece of music at the moment, and the items she'd take with her to a desert island. Enjoy. Hi, Emily, how are you doing?
Hi, Mark, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Very good. And thank you for getting up early for us. It's 10 a.m. where you are, 3 p.m. here.
It is indeed. No, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
So, it's 10 a.m. there and you look smartly dressed, business-like. I've had all day and I'm just wearing my casual shirt.
Well, I got dressed up just for you. So I gave me an excuse to put some clothes on that weren't athletic yoga clothes.
Yeah, we've all been doing that a bit, haven't we? I can't remember the last time I wore trousers, to be honest. What's the weather like with you?
It is, Washington, D.C., where I am. The summers tend to be very humid. So it's pretty humid out today, but we have bright, clear, sunny skies. So that's nice.
Oh, we're jealous. That's a very English question, I know, but it's grey and miserable as we speak today. But I think the forecast is looking better. It's looking up.
Well, good. That's good.
So, no, thanks for joining us, Emily. Really privileged to be chatting to you on this Project Positivity webcast. I contacted you. I've been a fan of yours for a while. You wrote this great book, The Power of Meaning. Came out back in 2017, and I've read it a couple of times and reread it recently in light of the coronavirus outbreak. It sort of, I don't know, it just spoke to me, it just resonated. And so I sort of reached out to see if we could have a chat, and luckily you said yes. But for those who haven't read it, the book explores the elements we need to have in place to achieve true depth and significance in our lives. And you believe there are 4 pillars that we have to have in place before that can happen, which are belonging, purpose, transcendence, and storytelling. So I'd like to, if we could, Emily, just explore this a little bit more. So belonging, I think many of us will have reevaluated the meaning of belonging as a result of the lockdown. Suddenly those interactions we took for granted, such as just bumping into somebody in the street and having a chat, for instance, have in many cases been impossible. Do you think that's a good thing that we recognize that long term?
Yeah. So, so I wrote my book, and I was really curious writing it, within this question of meaning and what makes up a meaningful life. And these 4 pillars, in the research I did, just kind of came up again and again as themes, and belonging really was the number one. When you ask, when researchers ask people, what gives your life meaning, it's always, 1, 2, and 3, friends, family, children, things like that. And so there's that aspect of belonging, these kind of long-term significant relationships that we have. But there's this other aspect of it as well that that was a little bit more surprising for me as I did my research to learn about, which is that, 2 things. One, these major relationships that we have in our lives, we kind of assume that they would confer belonging, but that's not always the case. Belonging is defined by being in a relationship or having some kind of interaction where you're valued for who you are intrinsically, and you value the other person for who they are. So there's this sense of like being valued, being seen for who you are, kind of a soul to soul, essence to essence connection. And some of our significant relationships have that, but some of them don't. You can think about, a child that's really, valued, or at least gets the message that they're good and loved because of what they achieve instead of just who they are. So there's that aspect of it, that our relationships may or may not have this belonging element. The other aspect of it is that if belonging is about being valued and seen, you can have that type of experience with anyone, really. Belonging exists in moments of connection, and it's a choice. You can choose to cultivate it with others. And I think that part of it is especially relevant today, because even though we might not be seeing our friends, at the bar or at parties or at our, homes for dinner, not seeing family as much, there are these other types of interactions we could be having as we're out and about, where the research shows that even the simplest things like making eye contact and smiling, or if you're wearing a mask and that smile can't be communicated, kind of nodding a head, wave, any form of acknowledgement really of the other person leaves that person feeling like literally seen, but also seen in kind of a more metaphorical sense. And then you feel that way as well. So when you kind of reach out to a person in that way, it builds this pillar for yourself, but also for them. And I think sometimes we're afraid of reaching out to somebody in that way because it seems scary. We're not sure how they're going to react. But the research also tells us that people actually like it. They like that kind of gesture of acknowledgement, because otherwise, literally when you kind of ignore somebody, they leave you feeling ignored, unseen, unvalued. So we have this power to build belonging with another person. And it's a gift not only for us, but for that other person too.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think one thing that's happened with me during this lockdown is I've reached out to more people than I would have done. I have this little personal project called Reach Out 100, and so I've made an effort to contact 100 people, and you're one of them, who either I've lost touch with or I've never met but would like to. And I think that whole process has created a new meaning of belonging for me in that respect.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's such a great approach to it, to really kind of lead you to reach out to people, especially I think people that you've lost touch with, that, so many. Later on, we'll talk about storytelling, and the story of our lives is filled with all these people who at one time were very significant to us, and to have just lost touch with them. There's something kind of sad about that. To sort of restore that connection is really wonderful.
Yeah, and just discovering what they've achieved in their lives. One of my former employees, or I used to be a newspaper editor, one of my former employees is now a best-selling author with HarperCollins, and I didn't know that until I made contact again. Somebody else is a backing singer supporting some really, really cool groups touring the world. So I've made these amazing discoveries as a result of reaching out and just making those connections again.
And I think that, again, it's so simple just to email someone that you're thinking about and just say, I've been thinking about you, like, how are you? Think of someone did that to you who you haven't heard from in years and who was kind of a special person to you at one point. It's just a very sweet thing.
Absolutely. We should do more of it. Of it. So your second pillar is purpose. And for many of us before the crisis, I guess our purpose would have been defined by what we do, probably our jobs in many cases. I think a lot of people will have lost that purpose, maybe because they've lost their job, or their job has changed, or their life has changed in some way. How do we best find our true purpose, and how do we find a new purpose if that has changed?
So with purpose, there are kind of 2 points that I think about when I think about purpose and its relationship to a meaningful life. Well, first, let me just define it. So purpose is, psychologists define it as a goal or a principle that organizes your life, that's meaningful to you, and that involves making a contribution to others. And there are 2 points to think about. There are 2 kind of, corollaries to that idea. One is that purpose can come in all shapes and sizes. So I think a lot of people think I have to do something grand and extraordinary, find my capital P purpose, something like changing the world or ending a humanitarian crisis. And if I don't find it, then, I'm not living with purpose. Whereas, when I interviewed people said, my purpose comes from raising children. It comes from the work that I do, all of these things that are kind of part of our daily lives. And also, to the second point, purpose is not necessarily something that you just kind of find and then poof, you have it and that's it. It's a mindset. It's a way that people can look at life, living with purpose. So for example, I interviewed a hospital cleaner who, she was part of this bigger study on meaning at work. And she said, my purpose isn't cleaning bedpans or mopping the floor. It's helping sick people heal. So, she took what one person would see as one sort of work with one sort of meaning, and she added this other meaning to it that was purposeful. And another study that I like that kind of speaks to this point has to do with kids. And when kids do chores around the house, they have a greater sense of purpose. And the reason is that researchers find because they feel like they're part of something bigger, like, helping the family, contributing to a sense of home, just doing something for others. And again, like day to day, our lives are filled with those kinds of things. And if we have the mindset that they are purposeful, that there are ways in which we kind of move the needle forward for our families, for other people, I think that mindset can help us live with purpose more, even when we experience, real blows to our sense of purpose, like losing a job or, having your sense of work change dramatically, or, if you're a parent, having your kids leave the house as they go off and become adults in the world, to know that there's always other ways to find purpose if you have this kind of mindset of living with purpose.
Yeah, and I think what I take from that is, and I think it's a key thing, is that, a so-called ordinary life can be a purposeful life. You don't have to be sort of, campaigning for peace throughout the world or saving the environment or, a big celebrity. A life as a hospital cleaner, as she defined it in the way that she did, is a purposeful life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of my favorite kind of literary expressions of that idea is George Eliot's novel Middlemarch, about, it's about a lot of things, but one of the things that it's about is this young woman, Dorothea, who when she's young thinks that she has to kind of do something extraordinary, like, become like, be the foundress of like a monastery or a religious order. And then as she grows older, she realizes that it's really in these kind of small everyday acts that she can contribute. And Eliot ends the novel saying something like, and I'm paraphrasing, but saying something like, the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things weren't so bad between you and me is half owing to people like Dorothea who faithfully led hidden lives and now rest in unvisited tombs. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that is. I've not read it, but I think I might have to now.
Mm.
So the third pillar, Emily, transcendence. Can you just explain what you mean by that before we go any further?
Transcendent experiences are moments where we feel lifted above kind of the hustle and bustle of daily ordinary life, and also lifted outside of the normal chatter, normal consciousness of our own minds. And it might help if I give some examples. So I know you live near the beach, and when you go out and especially we were talking before, and you say you like to go out early in the morning when there's not a lot of people there. You go out and you're encountered with the water, this kind of endless horizon, and the sense of awe and wonder. For a lot of people in nature, they have this experience of transcendence where they come into contact with something that kind of overwhelms their senses, makes them feel a little smaller, and at the same time makes them feel connected to something kind of more cosmic and more mysterious. So, experiences of the sublime can evoke transcendence. Listening to music, really beautiful music, and focusing on, and not just kind of having it as the soundtrack of your background music of your life, but actually spending time with it, and not doing other things. Meditating is a portal to transcendence. A lot of kind of religious rituals are as well. So there are all these different ways that we can kind of turn the volume down in our minds and, feel ourselves connecting to something beyond. And the reason these experiences are meaningful is because it turns out that they bring clarity. When you kind of encounter something that is either overwhelming to your senses or that allows you to come into stillness, like meditation or music, all of a sudden those petty anxieties of your mind wash away, and there's clarity there for you to then discover or remember what your values are, or have some kind of insight. And so people come away from those experiences with kind of some wisdom that they didn't have before. And often you'll hear people say, especially if it's after kind of a major transcendent experience where people really do report a complete sense of self-loss, oceanic feelings of oneness with the world, people will say, their values completely shifted. They'll even change their lives as a result of these experiences, because they do something that is transformative within.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that. I mean, one of the things I like to do if I'm swimming in the sea is turn my back on the shore and just, you know,
Mm,
face out and look to the horizon and look at the cliffs and look at the birds and, you know,
mm,
just be at one for a few moments, which is
mm-hmm.
wonderful and reinvigorating. There's an extreme example of that in your book. Is it Cory? Cory who went to the
Mm-hmm.
monastery?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes,
do you
yeah.
want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Cory he's a friend of mine, and he, after he graduated from college, wanted to go out and spend some time in a Buddhist monastery. So he kind of signed up to be a monk in Burma for a period of time. And it was, funny, he gets there, he has these high hopes, and immediately realizes that he's kind of in over his head. He's sleeping on, like, something not too different from a bare floor. He's sitting uncomfortably all day long meditating. He's in an enormous amount of pain. He told me at one point that he was like crying, wishing that he, calling for his mom, because he just like wanted to leave.
Ant's in his room.
Yeah, exactly. And but eventually he kind of, he figures it out, and he learns, how to, that's part of the experience, and paying attention to that is part of the experience. And he talks about how one day he went out, and, well, he reached a point where he was able to meditate for hours and hours and hours. And one day he really felt like there was something different in his body, and he went out to meditate sitting by a pond. And he had this experience of complete self-loss, where he said he felt one with the world all around him. And it was, this extraordinary experience. And he came away from it, initially, part of why he wanted to go out and spend some time in a Buddhist monastery is because he wanted to come back to the States and become a meditation teacher. And so initially, he was driven by this ambition to be, this great meditation teacher, even maybe a famous one. And after having this experience, he realizes that it's not so much about him and, his own ego, but about bringing what he learned to help others. And so there was this kind of shift in values that occurred to him. And we're still friends, and we'll talk. And it's that shift in values occurred, and it was clarifying for him, but it also like constantly needs to be renewed, so for him that happens through meditation. For others, it's by, going to church regularly or whatever, or, spending time every day praying or meditating or whatever it is that you do to kind of come into stillness and find yourself again.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite way of doing that, Emily? How do you find transcendence?
So there are three things that come to mind. One, I like to be in nature. So we have woods and trails nearby that I can walk in, and that's real. We're very fortunate to have those so close to us. I try to meditate every day. And I also, music is a portal to transcendence for me as well. Just, spending 5 minutes, I mean, songs are not that long, just to kind of be with, have a beautiful experience.
What's top of your playlist at the moment?
So I love this song by Bill Evans, an American jazz pianist, called Peace, Peace. So Peace twice, but the first piece is P-E-A-C-E, and the second piece is P-I-E-C-E. And it's just very, very peaceful, per the name, and just very beautiful. Every time I listen to it, sometimes I'll have a song in my head that I don't like, and it's kind of creating anxiety and disruption inside me. But if I listen to that, I just kind of feel myself settling again. And so that's something I like to do.
Yeah, and the great thing about music, of course, you can do it anywhere, can't you? Whether you're on the train or
Yeah.
the beach, in your office, wherever it might be. I love
Yeah.
my Spotify release radar. I love just discovering new music. Songs, artists I didn't know existed. Discovered one this week, the Oh My's, a US group, and
Oh.
done some collaboration with Chance the Rapper and whatever. They're brilliant, really, really cool.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Check
Yeah,
it out.
there's so much. Yeah, I'm going to look it up. And there's thanks to Spotify too, and things like it, it's an endless reservoir.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned storytelling earlier, Emily. This is the fourth pillar, and I think you say we're the authors of our own stories. How do we edit and reframe our stories in this difficult situation? Because the story that many people telling themselves at the moment will have got worse
Mm-hmm.
and not better. And so how do we sort of reframe that and get back on a positive track?
So I think the first step is realizing that we do have a running narrative in our mind about who we are, you know, where we came from, where we're going. And sometimes we don't realize that. And that's why, as I've gone around and talked about some of these ideas, I often find that storytelling is the pillar that surprises people the most, because we don't always realize that we are in this act of authoring our own stories. But it's something that we do non-consciously. And you know, let me just give an example. Like if you, for example, get an email from your boss or from you know your child's teacher at school, and the subject line is "call me immediately," and there's no text in the email, you know, immediately your mind jumps to conclusions. If you're, you know, like most people, you'd probably be worried that something was wrong. Oh my God, my child is hurt or in trouble, or I'm going to get fired. And so that's a story. You're like crafting a narrative. You know, you don't have any evidence for that particular story. It could be that your child is being rewarded for something, or you're going to get a promotion. And yet we do this all the time. And that example is very discrete, but we also do it with our own lives. And so right now, you know, for a lot of us, the story that we were expecting to live through this spring and summer and you know, fall, winter, who knows how long this is going to last, was very different than the one that we're actually living right now. And when things are so uncertain, and as you know, people do experience hardships, losing their jobs, or just managing so much with work and kids and everything else, it's easy to kind of get in a cycle where you're telling a negative story, like, this is never going to end. I'm never going to, you know, I worked so hard to start this business and now it completely went up, you know, in smoke, and, you know, all of my effort went to nothing. So that, you know, those kinds of stories some people are telling. But you know what a narrative therapist would say, and a lot of therapy, what it really is getting people to change and edit their stories. So what a narrative therapist would say as they hear someone telling a negative story is, well, you're discounting, you're focusing a lot on the negative. And the human mind does this because we have a very strong negativity bias, where, you know, if something bad happens, it's much more likely to impact us and shake us than if, you know, a bunch of wonderful things happen. So the narrative therapist would say, you're focusing so much on the negative and you're discounting all these positive things that are happening that you're not weaving into your story. So, you know, for example, like maybe the business did, you know, flame out, but you learned a lot, didn't you, from that whole experience? A lot of us right now are learning a lot about, you know, what we're capable of and what we want to do. And if you have lost a job, you can use it as an opportunity to reset and really think about what what you want to do. So there are ways to kind of edit the story and find more hope in it. And you know, psychologists find that when people there are all kinds of stories that you can tell, and the act of storytelling itself is not, it is meaning making because it helps us create a coherent whole, but we can tell, you know, bad stories that hold us back. And so if you want to tell a story that's associated most with leading a meaningful life, what psychologists find, it's that those stories tend to be defined by themes of love, growth, and redemption. So as you think about now, and the story that you're telling, I would encourage people to reflect on, you know, how has this allowed you to maybe come into new sorts of relationships with others, like your, you know, 100-person experience. You know, how is this experience leading you to grow? And redemption, like that's a story that moves from kind of hardness to hope. So from bad to good. You know, what is the good that's come of this? A lot of us have lost a lot. And we should acknowledge that, and we shouldn't whitewash it. But what have we gained as well? Have we gained anything, whether it's wisdom, or insight, or growth, or love? You know, so these stories can also have overlapping themes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a great example of that in your book. Amika, is it Amika?
Yeah.
Who had a very life-changing experience, but use that, put that to positive use. If perhaps tell us a little bit about that story, Emily.
Yeah, so Emeka was a semi-professional football player in Oklahoma here in the U.S. And he was injured playing football very gravely and ended up becoming paralyzed from the neck down. And he was a young guy; he had his whole life ahead of him. And in those weeks in the hospital after the injury, he was telling himself a story like this. He was saying, my life was great when I was playing football. I was, really popular. My life felt like it was going somewhere. But now, look at me. I can't walk. My parents are going to have to support me for the foreseeable future, if not longer. Who's going to want to marry me? My life is over, basically. And he was telling that story to himself for a while. And you can imagine that's a depressing story. And so people who tell those kinds of stories, which psychologists call contamination stories, where something good is contaminated by something bad happening, and that bad kind of poisons the well, that those people do experience more depression, anxiety, feel like their lives are less meaningful. And so that was Emeka's state for a while. But in time, he started to tell a different kind of story. He started to reflect and say, actually, before my injury, I was kind of a selfish guy. I partied a lot. I cared more about how I was performing on the team than on how the team as a whole was performing. And what I now realize as a result of this life-changing injury is that that's not the person I want to be, that I can be a better man than that. And that story led Emeka to change his life. He started he wanted to then live out that story. So he went back to school, got a degree in counseling, became a mentor to kids in his community, and a counselor in a school. And now the story helped him find his purpose. He said, the injury was hard, but it allowed him to find his purpose. So he moved from telling a contamination story to a redemptive story.
And a great example of the fact that we become the stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly, that's right. You enact it in the world.
Absolutely. So, Emily, what story are you telling yourself right now?
So right now I'm telling myself a story that even though things are hard, I still have, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. There's so much to be grateful for. And also I have things to look forward to in the future, things that I'm working on that help me move ahead. For example, I'm starting graduate school actually next month in clinical psychology. It's something that I've kind of wanted to do for a while, is go back to school and get a PhD. Hopefully, that it's a 5-year process. Let's see if if it actually happens, but looking forward to that. And even, as crazy and unpredictable as things are, that's something that's a certainty right now for me. So I'm kind of using it as an anchor to help kind of pull me ahead.
Fantastic. And what have you learned about yourself during this lockdown period?
I've learned that I'm pretty introverted, and my life hasn't changed too dramatically as a result of the lockdown, because I work at home or by myself in a shared office space, and I'm doing that now. In fact, my life has become more social because I'm doing it now, but I'm here with my husband doing it. And I think what I've realized is that my introversion has a limit to it, that I before I was kind of doing my own thing and I thought it was fine, but I'm actually so much more fulfilled and at ease when I'm here with somebody who I know and love on a day-to-day basis. And also, like you, I'm actually more in touch with people now than I was before. Before, when I'd call my parents, we just talk on the phone. Now we FaceTime one another, so I see them. I'm talking on the phone with friends more. And all of that has just been really, it's kind of filled me up in a way that I didn't realize it could, and that I wasn't really making time for before. So I hope I carry that with me into the future, when and if life ever, becomes more normal than it is now, to remember the importance of making time for that relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great positives we can draw out of this terrible experience, isn't it? Have you learned any new skills? People are sort of cross stitching and practicing judo and cake making, all sorts of things. How about you?
So I have, there are two things that I've two personal projects, I guess, that I've set out to do. One is to try out and see if I can do yoga more regularly. I like to work out. My body gets very stiff. And so I'm always so impressed by all these yoga people who can be so twisty and bendy. So trying to do that. And by the way, I feel a whole lot better. So I highly recommend it to others. And the other thing, a little bit more, meaningful, is growing up, my family's Persian. My grandmother lived with us for half the year. Now she's living permanently in Iran, but I had a lot of kind of Persian culture and influence in my life. And my grandmother and my mom, less frequently, but they would both cook Persian food a lot. And it's a very involved process. It takes a long time, but I never really learned how to do it from start to finish. And so one of the things that I'm trying to learn how to do now is make some of those meals that I grew up with and love so much, so that I can do it one day, for my kids and God willing, for my grandkids. So I've really enjoyed that. And it's a way too, for me to feel connected to, my mom and my grandmother and that side of my family. So in a way, kind of satisfying that need for belonging without necessarily actually being in touch with somebody.
I was just about to say that, actually. I was about to say, like music, it's amazing how food can evoke that sense of belonging and take you somewhere very different. Yeah,
no, exactly. It's such a ritual of our daily lives. And if you can, the smell of something can kind of take you back, like, Proust's macaron thing, like take you all the way back to childhood and, have you relive an experience that was very meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed your bookshelf behind you, Emily. If you could take just one book from there to a desert island, apart from Middlemarch, which you mentioned earlier, which one would it be?
Oh gosh, that's hard. I think that I would probably choose, my novels and stuff are here. So if I'm going over there, I have a shelf that's books of poetry and also books of kind of mythology and tales. And I am currently beginning to read Arabian Nights, 1001 Nights. And so I think I would maybe take that with me because I haven't read it yet. And those kinds of stories, I think you can read them and reread them, and you're constantly going to gain new meaning, new insights from them based on, where you are in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So it would be Peace would be your piece of music. That would be the Arabian Nights. And what sort of gadget or luxury item would you take with you?
Oh man, a luxury item. To have a luxury item on a desert island. I mean, your phone, you can take it, but then it's going to run out of battery. So maybe that wouldn't be the wisest thing. I would take maybe a good pair of shoes, because on the island, you're going to have to kind of be going around, finding food, doing that kind of thing. Or a knife, maybe that would be a better choice, to take a really good knife. I'm going to have to think about that one though.
Brilliant practical answers. I lived just on my iPad and then not thought it through like you have done. And then 10 hours later, that'd be it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that shows the difference between the way your mind works and mine, Emily, I think. Well, it's been brilliant talking to you, Emily. Thank you for your time. I know you're busy, and I know you've got lots going on, despite being locked down. It's been fascinating. I can recommend the book here, The Power of Meaning, to anybody. Fantastic read. Whether you're thinking about business, your personal life, or whatever it might be, it's got relevance. There's a great TED talk by Emily as well, which you did at a similar time to when the book came out, 2017, about happiness, which is finding happiness, and it's not necessarily what we think it might be. So that's a great TED talk. So I recommend you all go and have a look at that as well. I say it's been brilliant to chat, Emily. Hopefully we'll catch up in a few months' time when things are very different, and see how you're getting on.
Oh, I'd love that. It was great chatting with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks again. See you soon, Emily. Bye.
Bye.